You're watching Let the Quran Speak. Now we turn to Surah Al-Fatiha. It's been called the greatest chapter of the Quran. What is so special about this chapter? What important messages does it convey? And how does this chapter serve as a powerful supplication that God answers? With me is Dr. Shabir Ali, President of the Islamic Information Center. Dr. Shabir, this chapter is mentioned many times by Muslims throughout the day, apparently something like 17 times.
At least, because the 5 daily prayers which are required of Muslims involve at least 17 required cycles, and each called rakats, and each one of these cycles would have the worshipper recite this passage of the Quran while in the standing posture.
So what is so significant about this chapter that it has such a prominent position, such that we recite it in every prayer?
In a way, this chapter is a summary of the entire Quran, so that the themes which are elaborated in the Quran as a whole are captured in this chapter, though it's short as it is, just 7 short verses, in a very succinct manner.
So what are the elements then within the chapter?
Well, it might be easier if we look at the wording of the chapter. Yes, the basmala, or the phrase in the beginning with the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. This is, according to some interpretations, an integral part of this chapter. But in any case, everyone agrees that it is written before the chapter, or it is written at the head. But if I start with the words which are unique to this chapter, it's Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds. So this emphasizes the universal nature of God. We may as well translate it, praise be to God, the Lord of the universes. It's because it's in the plural as well. So whether we're thinking of our universe or some other universe out there, many parallel universes, God is the God of all of these. So he's a universal God, not a limited God, not an Arab God or God limited to some people, but universal. And he's described then as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is the Beneficent, the Merciful One. These are 2 names of God that are very intensive in the Arabic language to denote his all-encompassing mercy. Should I continue?
Yes, I believe that the first 3 verses then establish the attributes of God. Would that be a fair?
Yes, and that would lead into what would have come next, that he is Maliki Yawmiddin. He is the owner of the day of judgment. So that balances 2 things. On the one hand, he is shown to be utterly merciful, and on the other hand, he is shown to have a responsibility to bring us to justice on the day of judgment, or that at least he has that power and ability, not so much the responsibility.
Now, what do the following verses do?
Then the following verses now switch attention to the worshipper. The worshipper is then, by reciting these words, would be saying, Iyaka na'bud wa iyaka nasta'in. It is you that we worship, and it is your aid we seek. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us on the right path. And then the path is further defined in the remaining verses.
So then these verses establish a relationship between the worshipper and God.
Yes, a tradition about this says that God has divided the prayer into 2 parts. And interpreters of that tradition say that by the prayer, this surah is meant, Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran. And the way in which this division is effected, according to this tradition, is that the first part is a praise of God, and you rightly put it, the description of his attributes. And then the second part is a prayer on the part of the believer, requesting God for the things that we need.
So how does God respond to that prayer then?
Then it is said in that tradition that when God hears this prayer of the servant, male or female, God then responds by saying, my servant has praised me. And when the person then puts the request, then God says, my servant is asking from me, and I will grant his or her request.
So how do we gain the most from this chapter then?
This chapter can be most effective in our lives if we ponder the meaning of the verses, especially as we're just reciting them so many times. You mentioned 17 times in a day. The last part is of particular importance as well, because it says...
Oh yes, we didn't mention the last part.
Yes, it says, it defines what that straight path is that we're asking for to be guided upon. And it is then specified as Surat al-Ladhina anamta alayhim, the path of those on whom you have bestowed your favors. غير المغضوب عليهم, not the path of those you were angry with, ولا الضالين, and not the path of those who have gone astray. So this puts Muslims then in a certain mindset that we are to seek the path of the prophets, the great heroes and wisdom teachers of old who were guided by God, as we know from our traditions. And we are then also to stay away from the path of those who are described in the rest of the Quran. This is why I said that this is a synopsis of the rest of the Quran, because the rest of the Quran shows us who are those people that God was happy with, those on whom he bestowed his favors. And the rest of the Quran also shows the people on whom God's anger descended, such as the famous Pharaoh opposed to Moses in the book of Exodus in the Bible. And other such figures who are renowned for their obstinate rebellion and resisting the message of God as it was delivered to them through the great prophets.
So we should ponder the meaning of this verse then, of this chapter then.
Yes, and of course, as we are praying, if we ponder these verses, they can have the worshiper can have a life-transforming experience, because when one starts by saying, praise be to God, the universal God, then one immediately is placed into a connectedness with the entire universe and the God who governs the entire universe, with, in fact, all things that exist, because it's put in the plural, universe is. When one thinks of God as being the beneficent, the merciful one, then this should be a quality which is inculcated in the Muslim mind by this constant repetition, that God is beneficent, He's merciful, I should also be beneficent and merciful to other people. As soon as I'm finished with this prayer, I should go and serve humankind. And then the idea that God is the master of the Day of Judgment is a constant reminder for Muslims that no matter what we do, we will have to account for to God for our actions on the Day of Judgment. So I may as well do what is right because I am accountable. So these features of the Quran, which are so captured in a nutshell in the opening chapter, should affect the Muslim worshipper, so that his whole life and her whole life would be transformed by the constant repetition and, of course, more importantly, the pondering of the meaning of these verses.
Are there any benefits that are given for reciting this chapter? I know it has many names, mother of the book, and many other sort of things that the Prophet Muhammad has said about it. So what are the benefits of reciting it?
Actually, there must be some traditions that mention some particular reward for reciting this very surah, though none comes to my mind at the moment. But in general, a hadith says that if you recite one letter of the Book of God, then you get 10 blessings. And certainly this surah is made up of many letters. So the repetition of this surah will bring great blessings to its reciter.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we answer common questions about Islam.